Welcome aboard, everybody. Time to talk Buffalo Bills football. Combine week style. Interviews taking place. Interesting stuff we'll get into. Draft prospects. You name it. We'll do it. Today's video, and today we are presented by, and today's video brought to you by our friends at Northeast Roofing Professionals. That lovely logo above us that Anthony Prohaska, who's about to join us, loves so much with those beautiful snow, little snow-peaked, the little snow-peaked roof. Very beautiful, very nice, very pretty.
Like the higher register when you're describing this.
Roof,
the snow-peaked, a little bit. It's very nice.
They'll make your roof impenetrable to that lovely little fluttering of snow. That's what you want. You just want a safe roof, and you don't want any water coming in your house. That's basically what you want. And, it doesn't hurt if it's pretty, too.
Sure.
Not only do our friends at Northeast Roofing Professionals put up a traditional shingle roofs, but they also have those really fancy metal roofs, man. A lot of people getting those days, which just supposedly last like 50 years or something. So get into all of it. Price it out. Go see our friends at Northeast Roofing Professionals. It's NERPCNY.com. And now is the time to plan for the warm weather months, especially if you're here in the Northeast, to get it done. And they specialize in roofing jobs in Fayetteville and DeWitt and the surrounding areas. All right, without further ado, let's talk with Cover One analyst for the Buffalo Bills, Mr. Anthony Prohaska. How are you, Anthony?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
Hey, Anthony, quick question here. Okay, we got the three guys on the screen. You're the host of Disguise Coverage. What kind of coverage do you think we're running here with this kind of personnel we have on the screen?
I feel like, you got to figure out what positions are we going to be?
Sure.
I feel like, Paul, you're probably more of like a downhill, like thumping kind of linebacker.
All right.
But maybe not, because I feel like you'd be soft.
Wow.
No, but I think downhill kind of there.
Okay.
Jim strikes me as Jim, for me, I'm either getting like the veteran off the edge with like a good set of moves to like win with like hand usage, technique, and like feel, and like beating quarterbacks to the spot. But I could also
Von Miller had his stuff when Von Miller was good.
I don't know. My immediate gut was like Lurch is a center field safety that was afraid of contact, and had poor hands.
So we just want to give mean ones.
Well, I'm just trying to call it how I see the scouting report. Lurch does not look like a guy that wants to get in the lane, get dirty. Let's make some things happen, near the line of scrimmage. It just doesn't seem like Lurch's MO.
That's really hurtful.
Yeah, that's just no reason for insults at this time of the morning.
Early.
We were up very late last night doing Survivor 50. See, look,
I didn't hear this morning. Speaking of
went to bed with my hat on, woke up, and just kept it on from last night. So
a couple hours
from last night. It's a very late night, a 3-hour Survivor opener. All right. No Survivor today, though. I do want to talk Buffalo Bills, and I do want to talk about Combine Week. So let's get right into it, Anthony. One of the fascinating things and one of the interesting things we get in Combine Week is we get people talking again, which is nice in the game of football. So the head coaches and the GMs are talking. Let's start with Brandon Beane, who had a lot to say about defense and shaping the defense of the Buffalo Bills and how that's all going to help Josh Allen and the offense. So what was your take on Beane's approach here in the Combine and the fact that he seemed to spend a lot of time talking about defense when we all thought he was going to be talking about wide receiver and offense? Let's talk about it.
I think it's twofold. One, him and Joe Brady are getting a lot of questions about like the scheme change of going from Sean McDermott to Jim Leonard, because the idea of like, Sean McDermott was a 4-down even front type of guy. Jim Leonard is an odd front base guy, the tight front, hybridization with the front still, though, multiplicity, hybrid players, different scheme structure, all that. So like they keep getting hit with questions like that. But what I think is interesting, especially with Combine Week, Joe Brady and Brandon Beane did a handful of interviews, and they largely gave like the same answers between the two of them and the same answers for themselves individually across like whoever they were being interviewed by, whatever show, whatever platform. But what I thought was interesting was them kind of throughout each interview talking about the change for the defense and Jim Leonard's approach of, let's just get good football players. And I'm paraphrasing here, but let's just get good football players, even though they used that exact phrase multiple times. But let's just get good football players. You get guys in here, we'll coach them up. Little things like that that they kept applauding Jim Leonard for. And then Brandon Beane used specific verbiage in saying how like refreshing Jim Leonard's approach is and how nice it is for the personnel department knowing what his approach is. And then he even gave a specific example talking about, in previous years, being almost kind of hamstrung or forced to pick guys because of scheme instead of other areas. And he gave a specific example of like, if you've got 2 guys with a second round grade and one fits the scheme a little better, sure, go ahead, like pick that guy. And then he changed the level of his hands. He's like, but if you've got somebody who's up here and somebody who's down here, it's nice to not have to pass on the higher guy because of the scheme. And that to me I was like, oh, are we attributing more past draft and free agent failures to Sean McDermott? Because are you saying that there were guys that you wanted that you passed up on or had to pass up on because they weren't a scheme fit or McDermott and the coaching staff didn't want them? There continues to be these little nuggets kind of coming out from Brandon Beane and Joe Brady. And I don't know how much fire there is to the smoke. I don't know if this is what has been going on for the past couple of years, or it's like any job where, Timmy got fired and the boss comes to you the next week and is like, hey, did you finish that project? And you were supposed to do it, but you were like, oh no, I didn't do it. And then in your head, you're like, oh, I have an idea. And then out loud, you're like, you know what? Timmy was supposed to do all these parts and he didn't do it. And the boss is like, oh, well, that's why we fired Timmy. Could you work on it? You're like, yeah, I got it. So I don't know if they're just piling on to pile on or if this is exactly what's been happening, but some interesting nuggets kind of coming out from Beane and Brady to a lesser degree in that mold. But kind of just emphasizing the refreshing approach from Leonard and maybe throwing some shade at McDermott while they do it.
Yeah, it's an interesting deflection, tactic here by Brandon Beane. I mean, if I'm the one that stayed and he's the one that went, talking about McDermott, right, then let's continue to throw him under the bus to prove my worth that, this is why we needed change. Meanwhile, the other guy's not there to defend himself, okay? Mm-hmm. We see this in politics all the time. We have a sitting president right now that likes to talk about the last president more than he likes to talk about himself sometimes. I'm like, come on, can we just talk about where we're going instead of where we were? If you've made the change to get us going somewhere else, then let's talk about the bright future. And it seems like that's what Brandon Beane is doing here. It's like this little strategy of like, hey, if I can distract over here, it makes me look better, makes it look more viable that the owner decided on me instead of the coach.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I don't even know if that's unique to Beane or maybe that's not what he's doing. Maybe that's just what's happening or how it's coming across. But I think you see that kind of tactic in any job scenario and other sports teams, other sports. And yeah, I understand it. It looks kind of muddy and messy and ugly. And especially when you kind of pair it with like that specific example I gave of, not feeling like you have to be forced into one direction. That came on One Bills Live which is essentially like a Bills mouthpiece type of show. And then you had one of the other hosts being like, yeah, like you don't have to be forced into grabbing a guy or hardcore, height, weight, this and that. And almost like it was like, because again, if they're going on, if they're just being asked questions at the podium or if they're on a national show, they kind of have an idea, but the questions are what the questions are. If it's their own in-house show, I'm not trying to be that conspiracy theorist, but you can kind of put things together and be like, oh, are you trying to set these questions up so you can knock them down? And I found it interesting that that was the show that example came from and Beane's answer and how one of the hosts tied into it. I think, I don't know. I feel like the more I hear the front office speak, the messier, and I'm happy enough because I love Jim Leonard and I have for years and I'm excited for that. But if I put that in a bucket by itself, the rest of this offseason has been muddy and ugly. Even Joe Brady kind of like talking about Khalil Shakir and being like, oh, I think he can play inside and outside. We can continue to grow his game. And then he says, quote, and it doesn't always have to be in a short range. You know what I mean? And he kind of smiles. And I'm like, why are you smiling? You're the one who used him like that. What is the joke here? And are you trying to say that, like, why you're the play caller and designer, especially for the pass? Why was that like
McDermott didn't tell him, keep him within 10 yards. Keep him within
I don't
10.
know. And so like, I was thinking like maybe he's making a joke to himself because he knows people were upset like with how he used him. And so that's why he's joking. But then my thought is like, okay, if it doesn't always have to be that way, then why did you make it always have to be that way? You know what I mean? And granted, there's other pieces that tie into it. There's just a lot of inconsistency. Yeah, Joe Brady's brought in because he's a great CEO type of head coach, but he's running the offense. How are you going to be the CEO head coach if you're running an entire side of the ball? There's just a lot of inconsistencies that aren't like hard. It's not like you're diving into everything and trying to read between the lines. There's like overt inconsistencies and hypocrisies happening. And it just, I think, kind of adds to the muddiness and messiness and kind of laughing nature of all of it.
Anthony, tell me if you took anything from this. Brandon Beane said, quote unquote, nothing's off the table when asked about Taron Johnson potentially getting some looks at safety because Jim Leonard's defense may not use a nickel corner as much as the Bills had in the past. Did you take anything away from that?
I thought it was interesting that he gave that type of answer, but I also think it could just be coach speak. You know, the idea of like, I don't think he's going to be like, no, Taron's a nickel, and he's not going to be like, yeah, we're going to move him to safety. So I think he kind of just rode the fence a little bit and played that. I thought a more interesting one from Beane actually that came through was him talking about, or somebody asked him about like, oh, you know, new coaches come in and new scheme and how do you see this? And he talked about new coaches seeing how players are valued versus like what the in-house guys see. And he gave an example of, you know, having conversations. He said, you know, a new coach might come in and say, quote, you know, hey, for the money you're paying player X, I don't know if I'll get the use out of them. And so those are some of the tough conversations you have to have. Those are the hard conversations that we've started having and that we'll continue to have. That immediately to me made me go, interesting. So who is the defensive player or players that Jim Leonard said, for the money you're paying this guy, I don't know if I'll get the use out of him? I would imagine it's somebody who makes a decent chunk of change. And so that to me goes, is it Greg Rousseau? Is it Ed Oliver? Is it Taron Johnson? Is it someone who maybe has like Taylor Rabb has like almost like a $4 million cap hit? Maybe it's just that amount of money there. But I thought it was interesting that he gave that answer about Taron that I think could be more coach speak. But this specific one of, those are some of the tough conversations you have to have. And those are the hard conversations we've started having and will continue to have. So I think that one already happened. And I wonder, like, if we were to see 2 weeks from now, the Bills traded Ed Oliver or something like that, I would come back to that quote and be like, they were talking about Ed Oliver. That's who they were talking about because they've had that conversation.
The old cryptic talk. Staying on the defensive side of the ball, we've all heard the rumors about Max Crosby being unhappy in Las Vegas. The Bills apparently were inquiring about price. Inquiring minds want to know, is this a guy that the Bills should pursue? If he became available, should the Bills go after Max Crosby, and what could he do for that defense?
Yeah, I think the Bills should go after. I don't even think it's a Bills thing. If I were any team in the NFL, I would go after Max Crosby. I think Max Crosby is one of the best, not even at his position. I think he's one of the best defensive football players in all of football. And, you know, he did it to himself by signing the extension with the Raiders and staying there. But I really feel like because he's been on a bad Raiders team, the quality of his play, even though he's not like completely overshadowed, people know how good he is, but he should be recognized as one of like the hands down best players in the league. And he's just not, because the Raiders are a joke and they've been so bad defensively. And that's even crazier with how good he's been. And he's had no running mates on the defensive side. They brought in Christian Wilkins to be a guy on the inside. That went horribly wrong. They drafted Tyree Wilson out of Texas Tech. He hasn't developed. There's been nobody around him. It's literally just been Max Crosby and nothing else largely. And he plays the run like a menace. He's one of the best pass rushers off the edge in football. And his ability to be on the field so much. I don't want to jinx him. I feel so bad because I'm so superstitious, but like, he's on the field so much and he goes 100 miles an hour 100% of the time. Like, he never tires. It's insane. Yeah. So if I'm the Bills, I'm calling about him. If I'm any team in the NFL, I'm calling about him. It doesn't matter what your scheme is, what your philosophy is. Dude knows how to get to the quarterback in any way, shape, or form. He understands it. He understands the psychology and the science of pass rushing. He's got the physical tools and the technique to do it. And he's also a really good run defender. And he's nasty and mean and violent and a good dude. Yeah, everybody should be on, you know, that trade possibility.
So what would you be willing to give up? Because Jay Glazer said it's going to be the Micah Parsons package plus, which would be two ones and a player. Are you willing to give up your firstborn? Are you willing to jump in here into the trade negotiations? What happens here? What's Buffalo willing to give up here?
Yeah, I think that's where it gets like messy. I forget what it was. Actually, we talked about it, I think several weeks ago, or maybe during the season, the trade deadline, something like that. When it was referenced, think the Seahawks offered something for
Oh, yes,
Crosby.
2 1s, and they said no, I believe
Yes.
yes.
And when I heard that, I was like, oh. And then, yeah, you hear the Parsons package. I just don't think the Bills are in that type of spot. One, they have to figure out the financial stuff, which is tough.
Sure.
Two, then you're sacrificing draft capital that you don't have a ton of and that you need. Like you're a defense right now that has a ton of, we talked about it last week with the sign or no sign. Even if they weren't changing the scheme, there's just a ton of dudes who are UFAs from the defense last year. They need to replenish the depth. They need to find starters. They need to find a starting center. They need to find a starting guard. They need to find multiple wide receivers. Now, maybe the offensive line stuff doesn't matter because if you have those answers in-house with Cedric Van Pran, Granger, and Alec Anderson, cool. I just don't think they're in the spot where things are so solidified across the board that they can make that type of deal. But he is like a high A-tier, A-plus level player. And if you've got one of those on defense and Max Crosby and another one on offense and Josh Allen, play some hero ball a little bit and, kind of let your Jimmies and Joes be the guys. But it's always tough for me to sacrifice that much. And especially this version of the Bills. If this was the Bills several years ago, like when they did the Von Miller deal, I would be much more willing. But there's just some roster questions that they really have to address, and they need all the money and all the draft capital they can right now to be able to pull that move off.
It's the Man Shout Show with Boy Green Digital. We'll talk with Anthony Prohaska, Cover One, our Bills analyst, breaking down all things Buffalo Bills, including this week's NFL Combine. You see it right there, youtube.com/@MCShowDigital. That is our channel, and we'd love for you to pop that subscribe button and join our growing family, a growing community, as we call it, of viewers and listeners and interactors. We love you all very much. Today's video brought to you by our friends at Northeast Roofing Professionals. Let's just take 30 seconds, learn a little bit more about our friends from Northeast.
Finding the right local roofing company can be tricky. You don't want to hire the wrong roofers, or you could end up spending a fortune on repairs. The pros at Northeast Roofing Professionals can ensure your home is protected by a strong and sturdy roof. Locally owned and operated, over 30 years experience, free estimates, and competitively priced. Don't settle for an inexperienced roofing contractor. Turn to Northeast Roofing Professionals. Discounts for military and first responders. Reach out and let them put a sturdy roof over your head. NERPCNY.com. NERPCNY.com.
Yeah, see one of those metal roofs right there.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking the same thing. I was like, oh, the metal roof. And then at the end, we get the logo in a little different color scheme. Because here it shows with the red background a little here, but it's a little different with the white and the blue. Man, it's a good logo.
Friends in the Northeast, very creative people people there at Northeast Roofing.
Actually, this is all full circle here. So, okay, we talk about like these snowy mountains and, it could be reminiscent of the Denver Nuggets or one of these teams. What about the Denver Broncos, Anthony Prohaska? Jim Leonard's coming from Denver. Could there be – look at that segue, that transition. Thank you, Paul. A+. We're at full midseason form here. What about that potential pipeline? The Broncos have free agents on the defensive side of the ball. John Franklin Myers, Alex Singleton, and it goes deeper beyond that. Those are some of the top names in terms of their highest paid from their previous contracts. Could we see that? Because that makes a lot of sense. When new coaches are hired, they bring in people from their past to add on to wherever they are. Jim Leonard, have you guys and Bill's Mafia talked about that at all? Does that fit anything in terms of some potential changes this offseason?
1,000%. I think you're going to get some sort of acquisition. It could be one guy, it could be multiple guys that Jim Leonard has familiarity with. Just guys that can kind of stabilize some things. And with what they want to do defensively, I think Leonard raises the floor for this group because of what he is philosophically and identity-wise. But to really maximize Jim Leonard's defense, you need the right body types. You need the right skill sets. You need the right play styles. Kind of like the turnover Mike McDonald had with Seattle's defense over, the past couple of years to get it to where he needed it to be. And even if you have a ton of money and picks, it's hard to get that proper churn automatically in year one. So it's going to take a little time. So having the right guys at the right spots in year one could kind of mask not having them all over. I think the Denver pipeline is kind of an easy one. Like you mentioned, I'm really hopeful for John Franklin Myers. I think he's just an ideal defensive lineman for them in this defense, somebody who can play a 4-eye regularly in the odd front stuff, but someone who can also kick in and play a 1 or a 3 in the even front stuff. He's nasty. He's mean. He can do some pass rush stuff. He plays the run. He's just a good football player. I think he makes the best sense and the most sense out of everybody coming from Denver. But then, maybe, I think with Terrell Bernard, you want a bit more of a downhill thumper and presence at the linebacker spot next to him, and also somebody that has a little more versatility. But I could see Sternad more so than Singleton from a money perspective and just a fit. But those two guys are possible. I think it's more also tying into the Wisconsin connection as well. Like, maybe it's Jack Sanborn, or the big one for me that I think is a non-negotiable. I think they have to bring this guy in. I think he makes the most sense. It's Leo Chenal from the Chiefs, who played at Wisconsin under Jim Leonard. He can play that off-ball linebacker spot next to Bernard. He can line up as an edge rusher. You can put him in the A-gap and just mess things up for a different offense. He opens up a lot schematically. So from the Denver pipeline guys and the Wisconsin pipeline guys, I think in a dream world, if you can get John Franklin Myers and Leo Chenal, you are in a very good spot. But I do think they'll get somebody with some level of connection to Leonard, so he can put somebody out there that he trusts and not have to worry about too many things in year one.
And in a far greater segue, dipping right into that Denver Broncos tree, dare I say, the Bills have grabbed themselves a silver fox, as in John Fox, former head coach of the Denver Broncos from 2011 to 2014. More importantly, once the defensive coordinator of my mighty Giants from 1997 to 2001, where he really buttered his bread and made his that's when he, arrived on the stage. Anyway, I'm just kidding.
Was he the defensive coordinator when they went to the Super Bowl against the Ravens?
And lost, yes.
Yes, I think he was. Yes.
Yeah, because that's a famous Ravens 2000 defense. That was.
What I remember more. Yeah, it was. What I remember more about that, and Jim, you'll have more insight into this than me. I remember thinking Minnesota. It was going to be Minnesota and Baltimore, and then Minnesota got housed in the NFC Championship by the Giants. I think the Giants had a kickoff return touchdown, and you blinked and it was 21-0 out of nowhere. And that Giants team went to the Super Bowl. That was crazy.
Yeah. Anyway, John Fox has joined the staff in Buffalo, and this is interesting. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I was thinking about putting my feet up on the Barca lounger at age 71, but no, he wants to be involved as assistant head coach. This is a strategy by Brandon Beane in the front office to bring some veteran help and some wisdom, dare I say, around their young coach Joe Brady. So what do you make of this? Is Fox over the hill, or is he going to be a good asset here to the Buffalo Bills? Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, as far as him being over the hill, I haven't heard much from him for actually really, I would say not even the last several years, but since he kind of left the Broncos. He's with the Bears for, I think, several years after that Broncos job, and then he was with the Colts for a year, the Lions. I think he's been out of football for the last 2-3 seasons at the least. But Brady talked about it. He wanted somebody, he wanted a guy who still wanted to coach football. He said Fox is going to sit in the defensive meeting rooms, and he's going to be someone that Brady can lean on when things start to go. Bean also talked about him as, he connected Fox and Brady, but that hiring was all up to Joe Brady. Bean said he connected him. Brady met with Fox multiple times, like with Bean and the front office, then met with him by himself. And then Brady came back around to Bean and wanted Fox and asked for him to be brought on. I think it's just another move in the idea of Brady being a first-time head coach. I think he wants as many stabilizing voices and minds there with him to kind of help him see things. Again, because he is going to be running the entire offensive side of the ball, you got to have some people with their ears to the ground who have done this before and may be able to offer you some wisdom and words of advice to kind of keep things running on the track. But they also, if you want to play devil's advocate, it could work out, negatively. Maybe there are too many cooks in the kitchen. If you've got Brady and he's got Carmichael on the offensive side for him, and maybe he's got Fox over there defensively, but Leonard's running that side of the ball, And if Fox is kind of giving things to Brady, how does that gel with Leonard? You can play either side, but I think Brady's just trying to get a lot of experience and a lot of different minds and demographics into this building so they can build as comprehensive of a staff as possible to see things from all angles.
Yeah, I mean, maybe too many foxes in the den might be the better phraseology there. Just messing around because Paul's just messing with us today.
No. But speaking of
yeah.
segues, speaking of foxes, let's work our way into this. One of my favorite movies when I was growing up as a kid was Fox and the Hound. And then during that movie, unfortunately, it gets pretty sad and someone's trying to shoot a fox.
I haven't watched it.
It's too sad. Well, spoiler alert, 30 years later. But the fox gets shot at a couple of times, and there is a fox on the Buffalo Bills who could be shot. I saw they were talking about this in here, that Dawson Knox's contract has to be addressed, and if not, somebody could be gone, Anthony Prohaska. So what is it? Is he going to be willing to take a cap cut to stay, or is this fox going to get shot?
I warn you, this is the show of bad analogies. Go ahead.
I was going to say, this took a turn with this analogy and how this is going. I think he's a fine player, but his cap hit is just far too high for this Bills team. It's one of, actually, if I remember correctly, I think it's second high. It was second highest on the team last year. It's about $17.1 million this year. It's just too high for what he is. And you can recoup some money, if you're going to do the whole like pre-June 1st, post-June 1st action. But if you do, post-June 1st stuff, which you can designate 2 guys for those moves, that helps you a little bit more. You save about $10.5 million, but you're still getting a dead cap hit of like about 6.6 this year and $2.3 million next year. So you're still eating some money. And I think what also muddies it is you need Dawson Knox. Dalton Kincaid has an injury history and can't seem to stay on the field. And even when he is on the field, he's playing banged up and it's hindering his snap count and his usage. And even if he's 100% healthy, he can't line up in line. He's a bit limited in that role. He's more of just a big wide receiver. Or you can line him up in line, but you're not going to run towards him as like the point of attack kind of guy. You can do that with Dawson Knox and do some of the pass catching stuff with Kincaid. And then you have Jackson Hawes, who can run block better than all of them, is one of the better run blocking tight ends in the league, but he doesn't have the pass catching and, alignment versatility from a pass perspective that Knox and definitely that Kincaid has. So Knox is actually a pretty good bridge between the two and somebody, again, that adds even more value because Dalton Kincaid has been banged up too much and is injured right now kind of, and still with things lingering. So I think a restructure is necessary in an ideal world, he takes a pay cut. I think what also muddies it is he's like really good friends with Josh Allen, and not to get into the politics of that, but we've seen that happen with different teams, right? Where guys keep getting, not even to make a Jets joke, but like Alan Lazard is getting jobs in the NFL because Aaron Rodgers wants this guy. Like we've seen quarterbacks have some pull, and Allen's been doing that for several years with the backup quarterback. The backup quarterback is always just like a guy that Josh Allen likes. So that muddies it as well. But
so in other words,
end of the day, at the end, I don't know if it's that drastic, but he can't be on this team at the cap hit that he has with the contract that he has. So if that means he's unwilling to budge and you got to say bye-bye, then you say bye-bye and you save $10.5 million this year, even though you still have to eat, over $8 million dead cap. But I think in an ideal world, he takes a pay cut or restructures. There's no way he's going to get the contract that he got. He's not going to get anywhere close to that on the open market. It's just not for his value. They gave him that deal several years ago when they thought he was on an upward trajectory and could become more. He hasn't. I think he's a fine tight end in this league, but he's just not going to get that on the open market.
And I can't believe we're nearly a half hour into this interview. We haven't talked about the Bills' greatest need, and that is the wide receiver position, Anthony. We need to be talking about the receiver position. And we, in our game show last week, sign or no sign, decided we didn't want Tyreek Hill on this team. And I think we're all actually in agreement that Tyreek Hill and the Bills maybe not the greatest fit in the world. And I don't think we brought this up last week, but I'll bring it up. If he's on the market, A.J. Brown, trade or no trade?
Wow. He's another one, too, from contract perspective. Can you fit it in? But I think it's more, again, the assets that you have to give up to get him. I like A.J. Brown, the player, but kind of how things have ended with Philly. Are you bringing in another maybe volatile personality onto the team? And can you absorb that right now when you've already got some head coaching turnover and there are changes in the culture and there are changes in the roster? I would be interested to see kind of what he would cost. But I mean, Philly, I always think it's interesting with moves like that because Philly needs him. And if Philly is willing to trade him, that makes me go like, well, why are you trading him? If you also need like a receiver, why are you going to trade us one of your better or best receivers? So I have a little hesitancy there, but it is intriguing. I don't think receivers their biggest need. I think they do have bigger needs collectively defensively. But I am interested to see what they do at receiver because the free agent market is not great for wide receiver. And so you're either trying to finagle a trade for somebody. Maybe it is Brian Thomas Jr. if you can get him for a day 3 pick. But they're going to have to bring in multiple wide receivers this year in some form or fashion. I think they're drafting at least one. And then we'll see how the free agency or the trade market shakes out. But for the free agency wide receivers, it's a rough group. Even the top tier guys who are going to get paid, that's still not ideal. And then there's a significant drop off with all those guys after that.
But Anthony, didn't you come to know? Aren't you aware that A.J. Brown is a vivacious reader, particularly when it comes to personal growth? So I would worry maybe about some of those things that you have to worry about. All right, BG, go ahead.
Speaking of wide receivers, that's a great place to end here. And again, Anthony seems to have like a good radar for the BS meter, hearing things saying that ball, yeah, you thought that was something. That was nothing, you idiot. So, all right, here's another one. Let me try this one on for size. Keon Coleman. Okay, Joe Brady said the best thing to happen to Keon Coleman was him becoming head coach, and then they're talking about where he stands. Just so your analysis of the comments we got for the combine, and then just bluntly, do you predict that Keon Coleman is on the roster for the Buffalo Bills week 1 of 2026?
Yes, Keon Coleman will be on the Buffalo Bills roster week 1. And as far as the comments, I don't know. I think some of it is coach speak, right? Because they don't want to pull the plug on him, and they also don't want to diminish his trade value if they do want to trade him, right? Like, so if you're keeping him, you should say some good things, especially since your owner was like, we didn't want him, essentially. But then if you're trying to trade him, you also don't want to be like, yeah, we're done with this guy. Who wants to give us like a 3rd round pick? Everyone's gonna be like, why would we give you a 3rd round pick for that? So I think some of it is coach speak, but I do think you're getting some.
Just real quick, that Pagula impression is on point. So I'm looking forward to whenever you do that again. That was funny. So
listen, BG, if we're still doing this 10 years from now and I turn into Terry Pagula, please tell me to hang him up. All right, just tell me, just get out. just say, Lurch, you're finished. Get out. All right, I think we don't want him.
We don't.
Yeah, the filter. They say the older you get, the more your filter destroys. So I don't know if that's
and especially when you're like, you get a little older, but then especially when you have the money that Terry Pagula has, like I imagine
I don't care. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't care. I got a gajillion dollars. But I do think some of the comments from Bean that he made at the combine, similar to the comments that he made at one of the pressers earlier this year, I think at the McDermott firing presser. He spoke pretty frankly, like Keon had a great offseason last year. He had a great camp cycle. Everything looked great. It's his off the field stuff. It's the maturity stuff. It's, him essentially being a professional football player regularly. And, go to his exact words, what does he have to do this year or what does he have to do to be able to, be trusted long-term? Had the offseason he had last year, come to each practice, dialed in and in great shape. He had an excellent camp. Let's do that again and show more off-field maturity. Being said, he's seen that many times get in the way of people's opportunities to grow. So he just wants Keon to do what he did all last offseason in camp and don't let maturity issues off the field affect the product on the field. So it's really just, dude has some fun traits and size and frame. And yeah, he looked really good in camp last year. Like sincerely, not even just like homer takes or trying to get everybody psyched up about a guy. He looked good. And then everything kind of fell off the rails in season because of maturity and things. And so it's really the ball is in his court to kind of go from there. But I think he'll be on the roster. I don't think anybody's going to offer them like a day 2 or early day 3 pick that would make them want to move him. And so I don't think the value is there to trade him. And I think he'll do the right things throughout the offseason to stay on the roster. And that's a matter of how effective and mature he can be in season.
I think you're right, and it's amazing to me. I mean, the owner literally threw him under the bus and ran him over 3 times, and now he's got to show up to OTAs and camp, and he's like the pariah that everyone's looking at, like it's Coleman, man. Ooh,
It is. I think what
he took one in the gut there, Ooh.
Right? What also muddies that too is like
poor guy.
I do feel bad for him, but also at the same time too, like it's self-inflicted wounds. Like it's just it's
100%.
because of like how upset can you be that management is upset at you when you couldn't do the bare minimum thing, which is show up to practice on time. Like if they're not dragging you because you're not playing good on the field. They're not like, yeah, he's dropping passes and he sucks. We never wanted him. They're upset because you can't show up to your job on time that you get paid millions of dollars to do. Like, and I understand he's a young adult, he's 22, 23, whatever, and there's maturity issues. I get that, but like show up to practice on time. Everybody has to do that. Everybody has to show up to their job on time. Every kid in elementary school and everything has to show up to school on time. That's it. Like no one's asking the world of you at that point. Show up and do your job. And so everybody being upset at you for it or calling you out for it, I don't think it should happen that publicly, but also he has nobody to blame but himself because it's such an easy thing to do.
Now, look, the hope would be that, sometimes when you get publicly embarrassed like that, it motivates you and you switch flips and suddenly maybe, some of those things, bubble to the surface and you say, I need to improve who I am. Forget about it if I want to continue playing for the Buffalo Bills. If I want to continue playing in the NFL, well, those paychecks aren't too bad, as you mentioned. So there you have it. All right, another one in the books. Anthony Prohaska, always entertaining, always engaging. We all apologize for the terrible analogies, but, it's just a week in the life. We'll
Actually, can I ask one more question? Just one
more
more
analogies, I'm sure. What?
No. Just one more question.
This is not going to be good.
No, I don't like it.
We were ending very well there. Do you really? Are you sure?
Yes, I think so. I think it's fitting.
Okay.
Anthony, one last question. What does the fox say?
I'm not doing that noise, but I know what the fox says.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. That's a wrap, folks. Anthony, we'll talk to you next week, my friend.
Have a good one.